Class 9. Today I will teach you our constitution and its salient features in this chapter. That is chapter 1 of civics. A very important part. That is preamble to the constitution. Preamble to the constitution. Now this belongs to the first part. What is meant by the term preamble? Now my first question of this chapter is, and look at the book, all the question is according to your textbook. What is meant by preamble? A preamble is an introduction to the constitution. It walks before the constitution and tells us the source, the objects and contents of the constitution. Tells us the source, the objects and contents of the constitution. Then the historic background. Our preamble has an interesting historical background. On December 9, 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru moved a resolution in the Constituent Assembly known as the Objective Resolution. The opening sentence of the resolution reads, "The Constituent Assembly declares its firm and solemn resolve to proclaim India as an independent, sovereign republic and to draw up for her future governance a constitution." The preamble, amended in 1976, reads as follows. Now students, all of you look at the book. "We the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic and to secure to all its citizens justice." Justice means social, economic, political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship. This is the first word of the preamble, that is justice. And then what? Equality of status and of opportunity and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. Now, in our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact and give to ourselves this Constitution. Now, the words socialist, secular, unity and integrity of the nation were added to the preamble by the 42nd Constitution Amendment Act. So, the words socialist, secular, unity and integrity of the nation, these words were added later on. Now, it came into effect on January 3, 1977. The preamble states the basic subjects or ideals of Indian Republic. So the preamble contains the basic subjects and the ideals or the principles of Indian Republic. Now the preamble is a key to open the mind of the makers of an act or a piece of legislation. If a rule or law is vague, the preamble can be referred to in order to make out its meaning. For instance, the expression social justice enable the courts to defend laws protecting the interests of the weaker sections of the society. Now, let me explain it again. The preamble, what is a preamble? The introductory part of our Constitution. It is a key to open the mind of the makers of an act or a piece of legislation. If a rule or law is vague, the preamble can be referred to in order to make out its meaning. For instance, the expression social justice enable the courts to defend laws protecting the interests of the weaker sections of the society. Now, salient features of the Constitution. What are the salient features of Indian Constitution? Number one, a written constitution. Indian Constitution is a written constitution. Indian Constitution is a written constitution, and not only this, everything of the Constitution is written in detail. Everything of our country, every rule and everything has been written in detail. It took nearly 3 years for the Constituent Assembly to finally adopt and enact the Constitution. Now, number two, the lengthiest Constitution. Number two, the lengthiest Constitution. All my students, you look at the book. Ours is not only a written, but the lengthiest Constitution. It contains 395 articles and 12 schedules. No other constitution of the world so extraordinary in size. So, Indian Constitution is the lengthiest constitution of the world. 3. Effect of other constitution which suited our needs. The Constitution seems to have been affected and influenced by other constitutions of the world like Great Britain, Canada and Australia. Following the example of USA, our Constitution laid down the principle of judicial review. In other words, the Supreme Court of India acts as the final interpreter of the Constitution. The Supreme Court of India is the final interpreter of the Constitution. Now, next important feature is democratic and republican features. The Constitution proclaims that foreign power resides in the people. Democracy implies free and fair elections passed on from one citizen to another, and it is based on adult franchise. Number two, look at the book, all of my students. Civil liberties such as freedom of speech and religion. Number three, the rule of law. And 4, independence of the judiciary. 4 is independence of the judiciary. Now, next, our Constitution prohibits discrimination. There should not be any difference on grounds of religion, race, caste or sex. Indian Union is a republic. A republican government is one in which no individual has a hereditary right to public offices. There is no king or queen in a republic. India has an elected head of the state. President of India holds office for a term of 5 years. So, President of India holds office for a term of 5 years. Prime Minister also holds office for 5 years. This is the tenure of the office. Our legislatures, that is MLAs and MPs, are also elected by the people. Our legislatures are also elected by the people. Next important point is universal adult franchise. Our Constitution is based on the principle of universal adult franchise. It gives voting right to every person who is a citizen of India, not less than 18 years of age, is not otherwise disqualified under any law. So, our Constitution is based on universal adult franchise. That is, our Constitution is based on the principle of universal adult franchise. Very important. This is one of the important features of our Constitution. It gives voting right to every person who is a citizen of India. Number 2, not less than 18 years of age, and number 3 is not otherwise disqualified under any law. Next point, quasi-federal government. India is a federal government in which the powers of government are divided between the central government and governments of the federating units called states. So India is an example of quasi-federal government. India is a federal government in which the powers of government are divided between the central government and governments of the federating units called states. Our constitution establishes a dual polity in which the powers are divided between the union and the state governments. Supreme Court acts as a final interpreter of the Constitution. Supreme Court acts as the final interpreter of the Constitution. Our Constitution is said to be federal in form but unitary in character. Now, that is federal. There are a number of states. The states are independent, but there is a strong center. And if there is any ambiguity, any confusion regarding anything, there are several courts. In a democratic country like India, the courts are at the head, and at the head of all the states, there is the Supreme Court. Now, single citizenship. India offers single citizenship to her citizens. The people of India enjoying citizenship of the whole country but not of a particular state. Next, parliamentary or the cabinet system of government. India is a kind of the parliamentary or cabinet system of government. First point, the head of the state as the nominal head of the executive. His functions are chiefly formal or ceremonial in nature. Second, the real executive is the Council of Ministers with Prime Minister at the head. Next, fundamental rights and duties. Part 3 contains fundamental rights, and fundamental rights are justiciable. Fundamental rights are of 6 categories. Number 1, right to equality. Number 2, right to freedom. Number 3, right against exploitation. Number 4, freedom of religion. Number 5, cultural and educational rights. And number 6, right to constitutional remedies. 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 added a new part to the Constitution, that is fundamental duties. It contains several duties. Most important are duty to uphold and protect the unity and integrity of India and the duty to safeguard public property. So let me repeat it again. The fundamental rights and duties. This is one of the important part of the Indian Constitution. Now, part 3 of Indian Constitution contains fundamental rights. It is justiciable, and fundamental rights are of 6 categories. Number 1, right to equality. Number 2, right to freedom. Number 3, right against exploitation. Number 4, freedom of religion. Number 5, cultural and educational rights. And number 6, right to constitutional remedies. 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 added a new part to the Constitution, that is fundamental duties. It contains several duties. Most important are number 1, duty to uphold and protect the unity and integrity of India and the duty to safeguard public property. Now, next is the directive principles of state policy. My students, look at the book. One of the important features of Indian Constitution is directive principles of state policy. Part 4 of Indian Constitution contains the directive principles of state policy. The directive principles are intended to create a social order in which justice of every kind will prevail. A. The state should ensure that the citizens have adequate means of livelihood. B. The economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth. These principles are not enforceable or justiciable, yet they are fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. Now, again I am repeating because this is very important, that is the directive principles of state policy. Part 4 of Indian Constitution contains directive principles of state policy. Now, what is the function of the directive principles? Directive principles are intended to create a social order in which justice of every kind will prevail. Then A. State should ensure that the citizens have adequate means of livelihood. B. The economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth. These principles are not enforceable or justiciable, yet they are fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. Next point is secularism. The Constitution aims to establish a secular state. A secular state has no official religion. It allows equal freedom of faith and worship to all. India is a secular state. The opposite of a secular state is a theocratic state built upon a particular religious dogma. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Pakistan, Kuwait are all examples of the theocratic policy. The state of Pakistan calls itself an Islamic republic. So, my students, India is the example of the secular state, and these are the Saudi Arabia, Iran, Pakistan, Kuwait. These are the examples of the theocratic polity. Now, the state of Pakistan, just our neighboring country, Pakistan calls itself an Islamic country, Islamic republic. Next point, reservation of the seats. Scheduled castes, scheduled tribes have been given due weightage, and the minority class seats are reserved for them in relation of employment in the state offices. Next point is very important. India is an example of the welfare state. A welfare state provides for its citizens a wide range of social services such as education, medical care, and financial aid during old age, sickness, and unemployment. The Constitution of India lays down that the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people. Under Part 4 of the Constitution, which includes directive principle of state policy, the state is directed to ensure to the people 1. Employment, 2. Education, 3. Assistance in case of old age, sickness, and disablement. Now, so Part 4 of the Constitution, which includes directive principles of state policy, the state is directed to ensure to the people, number 1, employment, number 2, education, number 3, assistance in case of old age, sickness, and disablement. 4, combination of rigidity and flexibility. Our constitution presents a mixture of flexibility and rigidity. So Indian constitution is a combination of flexibility and rigidity. What is this? My students, look at the book, the last part of this preamble part, that is, our constitution presents a mixture of flexibility and rigidity. In the first place, there are few articles which may be amended by Parliament by a simple majority. Such procedure is very simple and too elastic. Secondly, there are articles which can be amended by a majority not less than two-thirds of the members of both houses of Parliament. Such a procedure is comparatively more rigid yet reasonably elastic. Then there are articles which fall under third category. They require for their amendment a two-thirds majority of both houses plus ratification by the legislatures of not less than one half of the state. So, Indian constitution is known as the combination of both flexibility and rigidity. In the first place, there are few articles which may be amended by Parliament by a simple majority. Such procedure is very simple and too elastic. Some are just a simple majority vote is required to amend. And so these are very simple and elastic. Secondly, there are articles which become amended by a majority but not less than two-thirds of the members of both houses of Parliament. Such a procedure is comparatively more rigid, yet reasonably elastic. This is more rigid if we compare it with the first part, that is, which is very elastic, only a simple majority of the vote is required. Now, third part, there are articles which fall under third category. They require for their amendment a two-thirds majority of both the houses plus ratification by the legislatures of not less than one half of the state. So this the third part. Let me explain. Second part is some articles which require for the amendment a majority not less than two-thirds of the members of both houses of Parliament. Such a procedure is comparatively more rigid. Now, there are articles which fall under the third category. They require for the amendment a two-thirds majority of both the houses plus ratification by the legislatures of not less than one half of the state. So this is the most difficult part. Indian Constitution is a beautifully balanced document. Indian Constitution is a beautifully balanced document. No single branch of the government can claim absolute authority or power. So India is a democratic country and it is the largest democracy in the whole world. In our constitution, we know that our constitution is the lengthiest constitution of the whole world because everything is written in detail. And in our constitution, we have the federal type of the government, various state governments, but this is unitary in character, a strong center. We have our Prime Minister. The Prime Minister in reality enjoys the supreme power and the President of India, nominal head. And then Supreme Court is known as the guardian or the final interpreter of the Constitution. And no single organ of the Constitution enjoys supreme power. So Indian Constitution is a beautifully balanced document. Now this part belongs to your first part, that is the salient features. First part means first chapter of civics. Salient features of Indian Constitution, my students. And this part mainly deals, which I teach you today, with the preamble of the Constitution. Now thank you all of my students. With best wishes. See you in my next class.